Adie, thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you, Rosie, and thank you for having me on the show. It's a delight to be here.
It's my pleasure. Okay, let's talk about intuition.
Right, intuition. We're all born with a sixth sense.
Yeah.
An ability to gain information and access information beyond the five senses. Mm-hmm. It's known as our personal ESP.
Yeah.
It's our gut feeling. It's also known as our higher self or our intuitive self.
Right.
But in our fast pace of living, we've moved a little bit away from this intuitive aspect of ourselves in our fast world of survival and staying on top of things.
Yeah.
And I'd like to start off the show just with a quote from Albert Einstein, who puts it in such a wonderful way, and I think the listeners would enjoy this.
Cool.
And he says, there are times in your life that too many voices are pulling you away from the language of your heart, but your soul quality of intuition will keep you centered. This soul quality is the best survival tool you can ask for. Your intuition does not speak in words, it speaks with the wordless language of your heart. As you are drawing your energy symbol of what you sense is your intuition, listen to your body. Whatever you are doing must become a prayer without any words. What is addressing you at the moment is your magnificent self who knows all your dreams, all your passions, all your needs. And the intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant and has forgotten the gift. So it's really interesting because if you go back to ancient man and you look at the ape man, the bushman, the American Indians, they didn't have the outer world as the distraction. They were finely tuned into their sensory ability. And they used to almost be attuned with nature and use nature as their element and their reference.
Right.
Now, looking even at the animal kingdom, you put a deer in nature and you'll notice that its peripheral sensory perception is so vast that it can hear a twig breaking in the forest from far away and be in high alert.
Right.
As we've developed, and even if you look at the martial arts teacher, instead of looking directly ahead of him, he's very aware of his peripheral energy around him to sense when danger is there and when it is not.
Yeah.
When it comes to us personally, and why is the center so important and imperative at this particular time? Because all of us would love to be loved and to love.
Yeah.
But behind the center sit so many betrayals, so many hurts, so much pain from our past.
Yeah, and angst that we carry with us.
Absolutely. So a lot of the time we connect with our rational mind rather than our intuitive ability. I sometimes refer to it as if you are in your car and you're listening to beautiful classical music and you stop at a robot and another car pulls up next to you playing wild, loud rap, your attention is going to be diverted to the wild rap rather than the soft classical music. It's similarly with the mind. We've got our loud intellectual part of ourselves, which references everything from the past, whereas the intuition, one has to almost still and listen and go into our heart space in order to find the right messages.
Almost like you're saying, so we need to get our grounding and just be level-footed before we could.
Absolutely. You know, if you go back to the first people were the cave dwellers, where they were the first individuals that literally took a reality outside of themselves and they began to create an intellectual representation that would appeal to them. So they would take they would incorporate pictures of animals, of nature, and that was almost an affirmation that there would always be food in the house. It was only later that intellectuality got a grip onto mankind.
Yeah.
And the first individual that really pulled in the intellectual ability was Abraham, surprisingly enough, where he basically told mankind about weight, number, and measure, and created this heritage of defining, in intellectual terms, the experience of being human on this earth plane. We all have the ability to tap into the sense. However, it's all around silent symbols.
Right.
It's interesting to see. I often work with the animal kingdom, and to be aware of what's coming into your reality. So a praying mantis lands on your hand. That's interesting. I wonder why this has come to me as a messenger.
Yeah.
If you look at the American Indians, they looked at the animal kingdom for references. I've walked into my house. I've got an invasion of ants in my home. I wonder what that means symbolically.
Yeah.
It's giving me a message. So it comes in the not so obvious, in the way of our rational. We've got to get a little bit out of the rational and look for these symbols in order to get information. So it's a very valuable insight, and it also tells us when there's danger and when there isn't danger.
Yeah.
So I've had personal references where I've really been brought to attention with intuition.
Yeah.
One day I was walking in Pilgrim's Rest, walking along this path in a forest, and suddenly I got this loud voice in my head saying, "Stop." But it was so loud that I actually turned to the back of me to see who was talking.
Yeah.
And with that pause, it got me to almost not step forward.
Yeah.
If I'd stepped forward, this massive tree trunk came colliding down.
Wow.
And if I was in its path, I would have been killed.
Yeah.
So it's listening to it and not going to, oh, this is nonsense.
Yeah.
Me as a reconnective intuitive therapist, what I noticed, I've been practicing.
Before we get into the actual therapy side, growing up and in your adult life, did you always have that, or was it an experience that almost halted you into being aware of that? I mean, we always have our intuition there, but I'm saying, were you always aware of those inner voices, or did something happen that actually made you realize, like, whoa, okay, there's a voice speaking, it's time for me to hear it?
Oh yes, and this is where actually the reconnection, how I've got involved in my therapy process. Great. So I've been practicing for over 30 years, and when I started laying my hands on people's body, just with giving them a massage and releasing energetic holding points in their body, I started seeing imagery, whether it was a card from a card deck, whether it was an animal totem, or I'd feel my throat closing up, or my heart used to get very, very painful and sore. And for 7 years, I kept this under wraps because I didn't want anybody to know about it. I thought, gee, you've got such an active imagination.
Wow.
So what happened is I used to pull it apart. I used to reference, I'd search, I'd try and find the connection to myself. And there was nothing that was relating to me.
Yeah.
Eventually, 7 years later, I put it to the person. I said, listen, I'm getting these crazy images and symbols and sensations in my body. I will give you the interpretation. Maybe it makes a lot more sense to you.
Yeah.
And I found that I was 99.9% correct as where they were in their life at that present moment and where their blockages were.
Yeah.
And I almost seem to pull information beyond the mask that we wear. So we walk around saying, hello, how are you? Fine, thank you, and you.
Yeah, and just keeping that.
Absolutely, the facade that we represent to the world, because we don't know how our needs are going to be met.
Yeah.
By actually saying, well, actually, I'm feeling very depressed, or I'm feeling very afraid today. We don't want to give it out to anybody because we're not too sure how our needs are going to be held.
Yeah.
And a lot of it we even keep to ourselves, even with our family members, or with our personal friends, because we feel shamed about the experience itself.
Yeah.
It's really helped people in therapy as well who are working on their own particular issues.
Yeah.
And literally, by having this intuitive framework, it also allows the person to access their memory bank in really being able to see what's really lying in their body, the blockages that are sitting within inside of themselves.
Yeah.
But more important than that, what I teach people is tools.
Yeah.
And I've got a lovely way in comparing it. I often tell people, imagine you've got the world's best soccer players on the field.
Yeah.
And they're about to play this magnificent game, but they don't know the rules of the game.
Yeah.
What's going to happen? It's going to create chaos. It's going to create frustration, irritation, anger. And we are almost like these world best soccer players where we're in this game of life, but we don't have the tools in order to enable us to be the most successful in our life.
Yeah, yeah.
So not only am I a therapist that works particularly on the body and holding patterns from the time that we are born right through to the present moment, but also I teach people tools of how to manage themselves.
Right.
So what I found is it's just me in my own little universe working on X amount of people, but I've noticed that there's a great need for people who are hungry for tools. And it's also about educating people on many aspects, not only on their intuition, but also how to access their inner child, how to work with their pain body as well, where, if you experience a physical pain, what we tend to do is reach outside of ourselves for the solution.
Yeah.
We'll phone the doctor or reach for the painkiller to numb the pain, but actually the body's trying to say, pay attention to me.
It's an alert sign. It's a ringing bell.
It's saying something's going wrong in our subconscious mind.
Yeah.
So the thing is to learn the tools of how to communicate with that part of the body in order to get the success that we need.
Right.
In fact, I've just put through a lovely meditation on my website, which allows people to access the pain body, and it's completely free of charge, so people can get this information to work out what's really going on with inside of themselves. So it's really a fascinating...
You mentioned something earlier on about blockages. Just for the in layman terms, what would you best describe as a blockage?
Okay, I'm going to go right back through time to the time that we were in womb. And when we're this growing little fetus, our cognitive side of our brain has not developed.
Yeah.
And we almost connect with mother to such a degree that everything that she feels, any shocks, any disturbances, any lost babies, has an impact on the fetal part of our development. It's an energy. Then we come through the birthing canal, depending on the birth, if we've moved from natural birth or whether we've gone into incubator. Again, it affects that energy system.
Right.
In fact, I had a woman coming to me who was born in a country hospital, and she was failure to thrive, and she was really plugged, and her body was hurt so much to keep her alive that it was quite incredible that nowadays she can't handle anybody touching her.
Wow.
And she almost starts stroking herself. If somebody does touch her, it's very, very painful. So you can imagine what intimacy or human connection was like for her. This came back to that time when she was in the incubator.
Yeah.
Then we grow up and we new to the world. So we look to our adults and our religious figures to tell us how are we meant to move through this world.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, our ancestors had come through a whole lineage of antiquated beliefs, especially around the emotional aspects of ourselves. We're told, be a big girl, don't cry, or be a big boy, stop being such a baby, I'll give you something to cry about.
Yeah.
So with our emotional energy, what we do is we swallow a lot of our feelings in order to be the good child.
And when people say don't overreact, it's like you got to conform to a certain way or be put into a specific box.
Absolutely. And we walk like robots continuously in this programmed way of behavioral attitudes in the way that we are walking and talking.
Yeah.
And what happens is that I had a little boy who once came to me and he said, when Daddy shouts at me, it feels like I'm losing a part of myself. And that's exactly what psychologists and psychiatrists talk about is disassociation or fragmentation. They're only little, and suddenly the safe figure becomes the unsafe figure. And it's so terrifying for them that they almost move out of their bodies to cope with the emotional kind of response. So we've got, from all of us, we've got fragmented pieces that are sitting outside of ourselves. Now that we're older and we've learnt what it's like to be human in this world, we've had our own children, we've done possibly things that are different to how our parents behaved, we have the ability to be able to go back in our mind's eye to the child to do the repair, which is amazing. And the most powerful, incredible aspect of our mind is the mind does not distinguish between imagination and reality. So you always have the opportunity to repair any form of dysfunction that has happened previously. But with that, as we develop more and more, we then go into the schooling system, and we taught fabulous subjects, but the one thing that we're not taught is life skills.
Yeah.
So, it's everything has a seed. So if something happens to us, we generally point fingers outside and say, you're responsible for making me unhappy. But actually, that's just the person is a teacher. They're just brushing against a pain body of something that has been experienced a long, long time ago.
Yeah.
So it's like a seed. It grows into a tree, and what you see is only the trunk, the branches, and the fruit. However, it came from a seed which is under the surface that might not be as obvious in your present reality.
Yeah.
It's going back through our history to repair and then to learn new tools of how we can almost become the magician in our life.
Yeah.
And live our lives according to seeing that it's a big game of life and we have the ability to conquer our fears, to work with our angers, and, just to see people organically changing as I work with them and allowing people to feel from their hearts about what's really going on inside of them rather than referencing the mind.
That's beautiful.
Which is beautiful.
Yeah.
So I just hope many listeners can be able to tap into my website to get more knowledge. It's www.intuitree, that's INTUITREE.co.za.
Yeah. Adie, thank you so much for coming to the
And
studio.
thank
Very
you,
last
Rosie.
minute, and thank you.
And thank you so much for having me on air.
Excellent. Have
Great.
a good day.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.